Hey there. Hey you. Tuning in to this wonderful podcast called Something's Gotta Give. And it's your hostess with the mostest, Mary B. And this is a continuation to my trilogy on the chakra system. Essentially, this is episode 2. And I'm going to be doing a dive into chakras 1, 2, and 3. And I know the last episode was a bit dense, and it's because I just wanted to be as informative as I can, but I also feel like there's so much power in sharing your personal experiences so others can understand the reality of what these chakras are in our life and how they can be imbalanced, whether it's excessive or deficient. And I'm just going to take the time to share what I've learned about my chakras 1, 2, and 3, which is your root, your sacral, and your solar plexus, and how I've been able to do my shadow work so I can learn what happened in those past years when those chakras were being created and how I needed to heal from them and become a more balanced version of myself within those chakras. Mind you, all of these are connected, so I might relate one chakra to the other, but it's because, it's all within us. Everything is connected. If you ever practice yoga, that is a big thing that they always say. It doesn't matter if we're working on our shoulders or our arms, it's still connected to our toes, our legs. Like, we are one piece. And yes, sometimes we're called to one physical thing, but just know when you're focused on one thing, it does have a domino effect into everything else in your life. So I'm going to start with chakra 1, which is your root chakra. That chakra is your first chakra. It's at the very bottom of your spine. So if you look at a picture of what your spinal cord is, you have your spine running all the way down to your butt. And so that is the first one to essentially be created, and that starts being formed at the moment you're born, and its main growth happens from then until you hit about 1 year old. Obviously, everything's always still forming, but the main time it was created was from the time you were born up until you were 1 year old. And essentially, that chakra is how you were able to form a relationship with life. So, honestly, this chakra is a direct mirror to your experience with your parents, because you do not have the capability of taking care of yourself. You are still a piece of your mother. You essentially still are your mother. And of course, your father can have more of an imprint within this life, but that also has a big effect within how your first chakra is created. All you know is where you come from, and where you come from is your mother's womb. So how was your mother treating you during her pregnancy? So was she eating correctly? Was she addicted to anything? Was she an angry woman? Was she a sad woman? Was she a happy woman? Did she feel love and secured, or did she feel neglected and abandoned? Like, all of those have a direct effect before you're even born. So essentially, a lot of your creation within your first year come from the womb, from where you come from. So if you ever want to really discover more about yourself, you might want to have a conversation with your mother on how her experience within pregnancy was. Was she overworked? Was she a single parent? Did she not have support during this time? And if that's the case, you might have came out of the womb already feeling those emotions of neglect, abandonment, having fear imprinted on you, because fear was imprinted in her womb. Now, oppositely, if you had a great experience and your mother was really happy and sought after and taken care of during her pregnancy, you might have been born into a life that was safe, and you were able to have your feelings tended to. And so the only way an infant knows how to get their feelings tended to is by crying or just expressing emotions very loudly. And essentially, that is them whining or crying, right? Like, they cry when they have to eat, they cry when they poop, they cry when they're lonely, they cry when they're happy, so whenever a child is expressing that emotion, it's really a sense of, did your parent tend to that? Did they try to figure out what was wrong with you? And did they nurse you back to a state of equilibrium? If the state is no, if the answer to that is no, you essentially have the base of your chakra system not balanced. So you might be embedded with fear. You might be embedded with trust issues. You might be you might feel very insecure. You might not feel like you have a right to be here. That's a big thing within your first chakra, is like knowing that you have the right to be alive, that you have the right to command for your basic needs. You have the right to eat. You have the right to shower. You have the right to just do what you need to do to make sure you can function in this human life, right? So if you have a hard time kind of just keeping up with the basics of life, that means you need to tend to your root chakra. So if you suffer heavily from depression, that is probably because you have an imbalanced root chakra, because basics of depression look like, you know, you have a hard time getting out of bed, you have a hard time showering, you have a hard time doing any of the normal things you're supposed to do in life. So being social, replying to emails, going to work, just life can feel very, very hard. Your root chakra is off. And for me personally, like, I was diagnosed with depression. I still have depression, but it comes way more in flows instead of it being consistent. Whenever I know that depression is knocking on my window, I know that I'm having a difficult time with claiming space for me just being me. So I have to make sure I do shower, I do my hair, I get dressed, and I put on a pretty outfit, and I go outside and I reclaim my space, because when I reclaim my space, it's putting my chakra back into balance. So it is a lot of work, because you essentially are doing what your parent was supposed to be doing for you. That's a big thing with healing your inner child, is becoming your own parent and reteaching yourself what it is that you want to be taught, so you can be happier and live a more fulfilling life. So essentially, with your root chakra, if it's off, everything else is going to be off, right? So if you just feel like you're off in any of your chakras, whether it be your second to your seventh, always look at the base, right? Like, you can't fix a plant by just cutting off the brown off the leaves. You have to get to the root to see, are the roots rotted? Does it need new soil? So essentially, it's just like that in your chakra system. Your root chakra is the roots of a plant. It is the roots of a tree. It is the basis of any program. It is the basis of your program. So it might take you doing some ancestry dive, or talking to your parents if you have access to them, or just kind of looking deeper than what you see. Discovering your subconscious and bringing that into the light, and being like, oh, okay, this is what I need to fix, and this is what I need to implement. So I shared what I do actively to fight against my episodes of depression. I also always ask my dad, who is the only parent that I have access to, about experiences of what happened when I was a kid, or how my mother might have been while she was carrying me. And if he has the answer, like, he gives that to me, and it definitely, like, opens my eyes to things. Like, my mom is mentally ill, and my dad shared that he started seeing signs of her mental illness during the later months of the pregnancy and into the moments of my early childhood, right when I was, like, first born. So the first 2 years of my life, he started seeing this. And so, of course, now I'm able to understand that maybe I wasn't held as often as I needed to, or maybe I wasn't, fed right when I was crying, or maybe my diaper was filled with poop for a little too long. Why? It's embarrassing to say this, but it's just the honesty. I don't know. I can't prove this, but to know that my mom was mentally ill means that she was not in the right mind to take care of me to the capacity that any infant needs to be taken care of. And to know that my dad struggled with addiction, who knows how often he was in the house, and if he was in the house, was he intoxicated? Was he able to look after me the way he was supposed to take after me? So knowing all that, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense for X, Y, and Z. That makes sense why I sometimes don't feel like I belong. For the longest, I didn't feel like I belonged. For the longest, I didn't feel like I could take up space. For the longest, I didn't feel like I could claim myself in any capacity. So therefore, I had to become my own parent. Sometimes I have to hug myself. Sometimes I have to just give a little bit more care, sit a little longer with the reality of my life, so I can therefore create a new reality, right? Because it is now my responsibility. Hopefully that helped you with maybe having a bit of lens within your first chakra and realizing, oh, maybe my parent did what the best that they could do, but it wasn't the best that I need. So therefore, I need to implement these activities, maybe be a little bit more assertive with my being, or forcing myself to do loving activities until they feel like loving activities. Your second chakra is your sacral. Essentially, this is a chakra of pleasure, and it's tied directly into the openings of yourself. So, the lady parts have an opening, and your male parts have that part. You get what I'm saying? Like that. The second chakra is essentially like your abdomen. And it's the chakra of pleasure. And this chakra is also responsible for all of the movement, all of the release that travels up and down into your body. You're able to really feel alive within this chakra. And this is the second chakra to be formed. So it's forming, I think, up until 2 years old. And there's a lot of complexities within this chakra. Your shadow self lives within this chakra. Guilt lives within this chakra. Pleasure lives within this chakra. Abandonment lives within the chakra. Like a lot of first time life experiences, all of these emotions that are very big and hard to digest are being formed within this chakra. That's why it's so important for parents to really be attentive to their child, because they might not seem like they're aware, but your actions are having a direct impact into the creation of this child that's going to be a part of them for the rest of their lives, until they realize, I don't want this to be a part of me, or I love that this is a part of me, and either work on it some more or completely tear down the system that's been created and implement a new one. So for me, I had both an excessive and a deficient second chakra. I was raped for years. So I had my moments where I was overly sexual. I leaned on alcohol to kind of be overtly sexual. And addiction kind of falls into all of your chakras, but I know alcohol specifically is something that is used to make people more comfortable and more fluent and more, able to enjoy the experiences of sex. So that's why alcohol kind of really is connected to the second chakra. And being someone, like I said, who experienced that terribleness of rape, I had been excessive within my relationship with sex. So I've had my moments where I was very promiscuous. I've had one night stands. I, for a moment in time, thought it would be cool to have multiple partners meaning like, okay, I talk to two guys, I might not have sex with both of them in the same day, but as long as I'm using protection or whatever the case may be, like I'm convincing myself that this is something that I need to be indulging in, or it makes me feel good. But essentially that was my trauma taking control of my body, and now I know that I hated that. But I also, knowing the truth of why I was overly sexual, or the truth of like, I'm a little awkward when it comes to sex. I can be a little skittish, or a prude is essentially the word. I can just shy away from the idea of sex in totality. Throughout my healing, I haven't had any new sexual partners. I did have a boyfriend. He was the only person that I was having sex with, but he would even notice that my sex drive for him and to do anything had just completely died off, and I felt like I had to do it just to please your partner. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this. I'm sure you can, that sometimes we're forced to have sex to appease our partners and not to appease ourselves. Well, that's a deficiency within your second chakra. So why is it that you are putting yourself in a place to appease somebody else instead of yourself, and you're not teaching yourself a good thing when you're doing that? And I kind of am more in the deficient side now, because I've been celibate. I haven't been wanting to have sex with other people, but I feel like I'm in this space because I just recently learned the truth of my childhood experience within my rape experience and through EMDR, so I'm just kind of completely shut off right now, but I feel like I need to be shut off until I'm open again. And whenever I open up, that's going to be a completely new experience for me because I'm implementing a new relationship with my sacral chakra and my sexuality. So if you feel like you're either over sexual or not sexual enough, or I don't know, you just question your relationship with anything sexual, what if you have like a porn addiction, if you are overtly horny, or if you find yourself not horny at all, or you feel like you've been celibate for years, or you feel like you can't trust someone sexually, something's off within your second chakra. So maybe take a deeper look into that. Take a look into what happened um, when you were super, super young. If you don't necessarily have memories of those stages, I do recommend you do EMDR. Again, to reiterate what EMDR is eye movement dissociation and reprocessing, or doing some type of hypnotherapy, or kind of just doing a dive into your family. If you're not getting the truth from your parents, maybe ask around to see if your cousins, your sisters, your brothers, anybody is having a similar experience with their imbalance of their second chakra, and figure out if something happened when you were a youth that shouldn't have happened. Or even into your adulthood, if you feel like you rushed into sex too quick, if you feel like you were pressured to lose your virginity in high school or middle school, or even with your first sexual partner, whether that be in college, if it just made you do something that you did not want to do, you have established a bad relationship essentially with sex and within yourself. So it's important that you tend to that. I also said that learning about my shadow was directly implemented into healing my second chakra. So anything that has now went into your subconscious because you tended to ignore it within your conscious, because ignoring it helped you within that moment of your life, but it's no longer helping you anymore. You have to learn how to implement your shadow into yourself. If you block off one part of yourself, you're essentially polarizing your personalities, and you can't polarize it for forever. So if you say you're not an angry person but you have crazy outbursts, it's because there's a part of you that is still angry that needs to be brought into light. So shadow work is very, very, very important into the overall healing of your childhood. You have to learn how to bring that shadow self into the present self. So healing anger doesn't mean that you're just gonna have the right to be always angry with everybody. You have to figure out what made you angry in the first place and how to soften that emotion. The same thing with sadness. If you are overtly happy but you find yourself having extreme moments of sadness, then you need to tend to what's making you sad in the first place. Implementing your shadow into your current self is essentially a balanced version of yourself. And that's what we're trying to aim for here. Just always remember, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. I've always been told that I have a very bright light. So I now understand why, because I have an abundance of shadow work, and my light continues to grow brighter the more I implement my shadow self into the present version of myself. And I do that by just being extremely vulnerable and embracing the fact that I'm a very emotional being, and whatever emotion arises needs to be seen, needs to have their moments. So that's just the way I've been able to heal my sacral chakra. My third chakra is your solar plexus, and that's essentially your chakra for creativity. Your imagination, your inner child is just running wild within this third chakra. But sometimes when we are our freest, most wild version of ourselves as a kid, we're ashamed for it. We are learning like our authority figures, and we're learning if we like those authority figures or not. Also, like, physical abuse is where this is kind of like locked in. So if you're a parent that tends to teach their child with whoopings or beatings or kind of just slapping or anything like that, just know that that's being implemented into that creation of that child. And making that child have more responsibilities than they're meant to have. So if the eldest child is now responsible of carrying the burden of being the caretaker of the rest of the siblings or helping out their parents, that's essentially like a deficient third chakra. Man, the third chakra is something because I had a plethora of different authoritarian figures, and I liked some of them, I hated some of them. I agreed with some of the things that was being taught to me, and I disagreed with many of the things that were taught to me. I learned that I kind of just never had power because there was always somebody else that knew better than me, and that I was going to be disciplined if I didn't listen to somebody that was in control of me. I didn't feel free, like, at all. I felt like in prison, so therefore I became a prison within my body. So I didn't have a childhood, so my sense of creation, my sense of imagination, my sense of feeling free and being able to just play with toys or run around in the playground or just do all the things that you're supposed to do in a child, I was robbed of. So I was robbed of my third chakra. My third chakra was very encaved. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of worry. There's a lot of doubt. There's essentially there was a lot of no confidence within that third chakra because I didn't have a childhood. So if you are a child who had to grow up just a little bit quicker, never felt like you had the time to play, to cry, to scream, to do anything, if you were always shut down, you have to really tend to your inner child. And for me, when I tend to my inner child, I get very playful. I have an abundance of coloring books. I learned to do crossword puzzles at a very young age. That's just something that my mom always had on her. So that was a form of play for me. And I don't want to say that, oh my gosh, why are you a child doing crossword puzzles? That was my reality. That was what I did in my childhood. So going back to that, it makes me feel connected again with my inner child. I also, just go to any park. Sometimes just being at a park where kids are playing makes me feel happy. Watching other kids play makes me feel happy. If you have nieces or nephews or any grandkids or anything like that, just being around kids sometimes allows us to be kids again. So that's a very healing thing to do for your third chakra. If you have low energy, if you find yourself just not being able to do anything, you're always complaining that you're tired or you're lazy or etc., it's because you don't have that free will of just life. Kids are just so happy to be here. They're so happy about life. I feel like if you're not happy about life, everything about you is miserable, it's because your inner child is miserable. How can you make that inner child happy? If you find yourself having if you have a hunchback, it's because you have a collapsed middle. Your third chakra is right in the middle of your body. It's your stomach. So, all of those things tend to be connected to your third chakra. And lastly, if you have a victim mentality, if everything you just feel like it's not my fault, it's because when you were a kid, it really wasn't your fault. But at some point in time when we become adults, we do have to take ownership of our reality. So unfortunately, the life that you have created for yourself as an adult is your fault. And it is your responsibility to make it okay again. Make yourself okay again, Healing your inner child awakens your creativity. It awakens life. And what's the point of being here if you're not going to be living, right? So on that note, I hope that was informative and gave you more insight and understanding into yourself and into the creation of your chakras. Oh, the last thing about your third chakra, I think that's developed until about 6. I think it's from like 2 to 4, 2 to 4, 4 to 6. So, yeah, sorry, side note. Anyways, I just really hope that that's helpful. And if you feel like you related to any of those, just take a deeper dive. Like I said, I do think Eastern Body, Western Mind by Anodia Judith is a very informative book and something that everyone should read. Obviously, there's way more information in this book. I literally can't go into the depths of it because this is not a podcast essentially just about the book. It's a podcast about the formations of your chakra and my personal experiences with them. So if you feel like called to it, which I hope you are, because everybody should be aware to the creation of self and our energetic centers, I suggest that you do. And thank you for listening to the second series of this trilogy. The next podcast, I'm going to be wrapping this up talking about your heart chakra, your throat chakra, your third eye, and your crown chakra, and tying the whole picture of this whole system together in hopes that it inspires you to do a deep dive within yourself and learn more about your energy centers and how it could be excessive, deficient, how it's created, and how you may still be in alignment with it, and how can you pour into that a little bit more. You're no longer in alignment with it and you want to change that. On that note, I give you the courage and the wisdom and the love to tend to your shadow, tend to your wounds, tend to your victimized personality traits, and change if that's what you're called to do. And the strength to be confident enough to do so, to be confident enough to own your truth, because you know better than anybody else what your experience in this life is. On that note, have a great week. I'm super excited to wrap this up with you next Monday. Until then, I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.